I love that one. That's a good intro right there. Wow. Thank you all for joining us on this Chill with Jim episode where it is always, always, always business up top and pajamas on the bottom. I would like to thank everyone for coming out. I am your host, Jim McCarthy, and I am the client advocate for Strix, Louisiana. My job is to make sure that our clients are set up with the best software, the best equipment, and the best possible IT solutions to help make sure that their businesses are running at optimal efficiency. We also have David DeArmond with us.
Hey there, everybody. David Diorman, owner of Strix LA. Happy to be here today. We also have Brad Proctor joining us today. So, little unexpected guest.
Guest appearance. Awesome. Well, before we start, how do I know it's really you guys? How can I trust that it's really David and it's really Brad? How can I trust that? I have zero trust right now.
That's an important question, but maybe a more important question is like, are you in jail or something, or is that keeping you in or keeping everybody else out?
I think it's yes to both questions there. So it's keeping me in, but keeping others out because I have zero trust right now after going over all of that today's episode. All this research, I don't trust anything. It seems to be the best way of life. But before we start out, I got a little ahead of ourselves, but a little bit about Strix here. We believe that there's always a better, simpler, more secure way to do just about everything. And so what that means to us is that we are constantly searching and adapting our processes to make sure that we do indeed have the best possible solution in place. And we believe that part of this responsibility is to help educate others out there, as well as our clients, as to maybe some of the current resources they have in place. We want to bring some awareness to security risks that are happening and just go over some of the general IT trends of the world today. And so today we're going to be touching on the security factor here. Like I said, we do like to bring awareness to a lot of the security topics that are out there. And what's cool about this one is it's a trending kind of a buzzword you're going to hear these days at the same time. So we're hitting in kind of security and what's happening in the IT trends as of today. So what we're going to be talking about is a concept, a principle, a belief, a theory, a philosophy, a way of living known as
a religion. It sounds like a religion. Everything you just explained, I'm pretty sure.
I'm not going to go there, but it's pretty close. We're talking about zero trust today, and so we'll kind of go into what exactly this means. We're going to go into some of the examples and implementations that you can go ahead and use to get your business on the zero trust path to cybersecurity. So,
Thought you were about to say like path to righteousness or something. Like we were really gonna embrace this religious side. Enlightenment.
Yes. Yeah. So the zero trust concept actually stems from a realization that the traditional security model operated on the assumption that basically everything that was inside of your organization's network should be trusted. So with this mindset, it's assumed that the users, the software, the devices that are already within your network, it assumes they haven't been compromised and that all the users, services, manufacturers, that they're acting responsibly and can be trusted. So once the zero trust model recognized that, it actually recognized that trust itself is a vulnerability and can be the weak point that leads to bad things happening, to the bad guys getting in. So, you think about it, once connected to the internal network here, entities, whether they're good bad, if it's just a good-hearted user that's unknowingly compromised, or a bad guy that intentionally broke in. With this concept here, they're really free to move kind of laterally throughout the network. They can access a lot of data, manipulate, steal. Maybe they're going to go ahead and take some of that data and hold it for ransom. Once they're in that network with this concept, they're really able to kind of go around whatever their little digital hands can get on. They're going to grab it and hold on to it. Now, this is kind of like a trust all principle. So it's like a criminal picking the lock to the main door of your bank. So they pick the lock, and once they're inside the bank, there's really little to no resistance from there. The bank says, "Oh well, since you're inside of our bank, we trust you. You
Yeah.
must be here for a good reason."
If you got in, you must be okay.
So that's kind of the analogy I wanted to use here was, once they get beyond this kind of security perimeter here with this model, the trust all kind of principle, they're free to do quite a bit. Now, with the zero trust model, the assumption goes the other way. It's assuming that all the users, systems, and services that are operating within your technology environment, they need to be authenticated first before they are granted access to anything or before they are trusted. So what this means is you're going to verify and authenticate anything and everything that's trying to connect on that IT infrastructure. The zero trust model approaches in a different way where organizations can leverage things like segmentation and micro perimeters to determine whether to trust or grant access to a user, application, or device. Now, we've actually had a really good chill with Jim, if you guys want to go back and check it out if you haven't seen it, about network segmentation. It has it's the same concept we're talking about here, and I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen so I can break it down a little bit further visually for you guys. And so with the traditional kind of security perimeter, let's call it, that you're going to see that, and yeah, you can see my mouse. Awesome. You're going to see that this big circle here represents the outer perimeter, the first line of defense, right? And then within that network, there's there's 5 other little security perimeters here. So each one of these has like a firewall, or you can think of it as like a digital bouncer, kind of monitoring the entrance to each one of these locations. And so this means if the bad guy gets beyond the first outer perimeter, they have one more layer basically that they have to go through to get to any of these resources that you see within those groups. Now, if we go back even further with the trust all approach we talked about earlier, there would really only be an outer perimeter for that network in that example. So there would be one line of defense where everything was within it. They treated all of the resources kind of as a whole, where we'll just protect them with this big vault or this big wall of security, but we're going to handle it all kind of as one entity. When we're talking about the segmentation, the micro perimeters, what we're looking at is more along the lines of this. So you're still going to have your outer defense here. And what it differs in here is you're going to see that each asset, each resource, whether it's a computer or other digital asset, it's going to have its own little digital bouncer, its own little perimeter put around it. So now, not only do they have to breach the outer perimeter, they have to breach the perimeter with each one of those categories or group, and then they have to go on and break into that individual device. They have to breach this perimeter as well. And we talk about it all the time at Anchoa Gym. Creating layer upon layer upon layer of security, it exponentially enhances your protection. So you're putting as many stops, as many barriers, as many walls for that bad guy to run into as you possibly can. And so when we talk about that micro segmenting, just think about segmenting everything down to even, maybe some of the basic systems that are on each device. And so now those are segmented, those have their own security barrier that needs to be broken before they can get into that. So it really helps bolster your entire security really stance when it comes to preventing the bad guys from getting in. And so, David, I know you've been in the IT world for 20 years now. So you started when you were 12. That's awesome. Do you recall when you started to kind of first see the principles of zero trust being put into place, and
I
what
mean,
some of those areas were?
yeah, actual use. I guess it's always been in place since I've been in IT. When you talk about things like network segmentation, there was always some element of it. What you find, though, especially in the small business world that we operate in, it increases the complexity of a network, of a system, because you have to kind of explicitly allow one system to talk to another. And so I remember the first time I ran into another term, you call it application whitelisting. It's the same idea of zero trust with applications that are running on a computer or on a network. There was a company, and I don't know, this was probably 10 or 15 years ago, that was rolling out a product, a service that allowed for application whitelisting, meaning if we don't tell you it's okay for this program to run, it's not allowed to run. And that's what zero trust is. If we don't explicitly say that you are okay, you don't get to do anything. And so I tried implementing that, and it was such a beast, and it was not very effective, because it computers, there are hundreds of little programs running in the background. And when you have to explicitly say this one's okay, and then when it's updated, you have to say it's okay again, and these updates are coming through constantly, it was so burdensome. But that was, you asked me how long ago, that was probably 15 years ago, and it's come a very long way since then. And I think that philosophy, companies have taken that philosophy, and some people with great ideas have taken the philosophy and created systems to help you manage it easier. And what we're seeing today is the really smart, innovative people out there are creating products to make zero trust a reality. It's happening at the same time where everyone's using technology even more, so it's happening at the right time, which the technology seems to happen. Markets, that's the way they work. The right technology hits at the right time, because that's what the market is asking for. But and that's why I think it's important we do this episode, because I'm seeing, I didn't look on Twitter to see if I'm right or wrong, but it sure seems like zero trust, that word, that phrase, is popping up all over the place. I think it's important for people to understand, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's become quite a big buzzword. I know that it's funny how those words become, even if you don't know what they are, it becomes like what you want. Like, oh well, my service provider does the zero trust, so I want them. Well,
But
what are you doing with that? How does that work in your environment? Well, we're zero trusting
we
everything.
just don't trust. So Brad, I'm interested. You and I kind of took a little bit of a different path. I know you used to work a little bit more on the consumer side. Did you see zero trust popping up years ago? What's your experience with it?
Not, especially not on the consumer side for sure. And you're still not even really seeing it nowadays. Hopefully we will, but I think it's really become, I hate the word buzzword because it is a necessary thing, but it has become a buzzword. And there's many things that systems that do it right, and there's some that don't do it right. And so it's a hard concept to grasp when you really start to dig into what it means. And so, like David said, thankfully there are systems and there are software that's getting better to make it a lot easier to manage.
Yeah, I can only imagine having to whitelist every single process or system that's going on right now in my computer.
Yep. And yet it's being done.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I know Brad's a big fan of Threat Locker. We use it here as well, and that's exactly what it's doing on our computers right now. It has learned what should be running on our systems, and if anything that isn't right tries to run on our systems, it's going to block it, and it's going to let us know, hey, this thing over here is trying to talk to the other things on your computer, and we're not going to let it talk until you tell us it's okay.
And it's not, the concept is really not all that new. I mean, it's existed in networking for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, a default deny policy on a firewall has been the default for years. It's just now we're applying it across the board and saying, okay, if we segment everything, default deny applies. So now we've got to allow everything. How do we do that?
That's a good point. Yeah, it has. You can see a transition of where it was kind of set up in one area, but the need, like David said, with the need for all of the new ways that we are sharing, interacting, working, it was imperative that we took this concept and found a way to put it to everything. So
yeah, and you're seeing it more, I think, with on the consumer side. We kind of briefly talked about that in the wireless networking and your wireless routers that are out there now. They are tending to adopt that zero trust or default deny principle, meaning none of the devices on the network, you can turn it on so that none of the devices on the network can talk to each other. And like our guest network that we have, nothing on the guest network can talk to each other, and that's to protect our guests. It protects us as well. If you get on our guest wireless, you basically have this one little pipe open to the internet, and you can do that, but you're not doing anything else. So that it's that zero trust principle.
Yeah, I like that concept as well. You're talking about when there's a need, there's something provided. That's, I guess, cause and effect a little bit, a supply and demand.
Yeah.
Chicken or the egg. But as the technology calls for these type of things, there's innovators out there that are, oh, we need something for this. Or, for a long time we were seeing that small businesses, less than 10 computers, 10 employees, they didn't have a place to turn to for IT support. It was just too expensive, and the IT companies really didn't want to have a company that small because it was really expensive for them. So innovators like Strix come up with their shields, and they can give those to smaller businesses to help protect them. So it's that seeing the need and then someone coming along and creating a solution.
Making it manageable, I think, is key. I mean, especially for a small business. I mean, zero trust applications and framework, they've existed for a while. It's just been a pain to implement, like David explained. And you're not going to get a business with 10 users or less to jump on board, because it's going to cost them a lot of money to implement and to maintain. And it's just not feasible.
Yeah, one of the advantages of a business that size is your flexibility, your ability to pivot quickly. That's another buzzword that's out there now. To pivot your business, or you can just react very, very quickly when you're that small. And when you implement something like zero trust or application or network whitelisting, then it slows you down. And most of these businesses that do not slow them down. That's the kind of the big thing coming from the technology side. Anytime we slow one of our clients down, boy, you hear about it. You hear about it quick.
Yeah, that's a good point. And talking about implementation, which was just mentioned, there's quite a few different approaches to implementing the zero trust model. So we're going to just touch on a few of the key components here, just to kind of do a 1,000-foot view or something like that. Look a little bit outside, but one of the first steps you're going to want to take is to identify what it is you're trying to protect. Now, this is often called in our industry the protect surface. So, I'm going to analyze all the things my business has, all the devices connected, all the security software, all the different systems I use, and I'm going to evaluate and identify those ones that are most crucial. So typically this is going to be, it's going to include your data, your assets, your applications, your services, the ones that are crucial that you must have to really operate. Those are going to be your protect surface. So those are going to be what you put inside the vault or inside these little security perimeters. And so the next step after that is going to, once you've identified everything that you want to protect, it's going to evaluate how that entity is communicating and how the traffic between that and your organization is actually moving. You want to understand how it's talking to each other. How does it report into the network? How does it report into your organization? It's important to understand a lot of what's going on with each of those. You want to know basically who needs access, what applications they're going to be using, where they're trying to access, when this area should be accessed, why it's trying to be accessed, and how the connections are established or how that is being accessed. And so when you know the who, what, where, when, why, and how, it helps you define and create these perimeters that we talked about so that you can put them into place. Because you really need to know, let's say we know that our analyst only needs to be able to access the system 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. Boom, there's the when. So we know if, hey, we're getting some attempts here to get into the system, and it's 7:30 on a Tuesday night. This is not normal behavior. So you can limit things there. You know that the analyst, who is the who, only needs to access 2 of these databases. So you know where they need to get to, and then what applications they use to talk to those services or to talk to that area. So once you start to see this big picture here, that allows you to kind of map out how everything is running and talking, and then you can start to put up those boundaries. And it sounds like a lot. But I think once you start to break it all down, it starts to the picture starts to just flow, and you start to piece everything together.
Yeah, and most businesses tend to follow the same kind of cadence. The one big difference I am seeing today, and I guess you'd call it a big difference. I'm sure it's been this way, but we see people working non-standard hours now, whereas you used to really kind of be able to depend on that 8 to 5 hour time of day. we're seeing a lot now. People are just working weird hours. I think part of it, when people went home and started to work from home, and employers started to realize you give people some freedom to work and allow them to work non-standard hours, then productivity increases. And so we're seeing that a little bit more. And it's important, especially if you've already implemented Zero Trust, or you are implementing, going through this exercise that you were just talking about, that you consider the fact that the way we work may be changing.
Yeah, and so if you think about the past with the kind of that trust, all the way things used to be, it was a lot easier, I believe, because you would say, all right, everything inside of this building we need to protect. And today, determining what you need to protect is going to involve applications and data that's stored maybe on premises, and some of it's in the cloud. And then you look at where the users are accessing these resources, like David talked about. They might be using multiple devices from multiple locations. Today, they work from the Starbucks. Tomorrow, they're working from their house. The next day, they're going to go to the office. But then maybe after that, they're on vacation. So they're trying to access everything from Spain. You really, it became this whole new expanse of where and when and how and who is logging in. And so that's why it's really important to get like a very intimate understanding of your entire technology environment. You really want to get in there. IT companies can help you map that out. David, it looked like you had something.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking, recently we've been going through some documentation exercises, and for regulatory reasons, I guess you'd say. And most of these documents, they've been around for a long time. People take templates of templates of templates, and they kind of create their own little world. And what we're seeing in the templates now, it's now considered an old school approach. 2 years ago it wasn't old school. Now it's considered old school, where you have a central office and your central network, and you can only access from this location. Just like what you were talking about, the landscape has changed so much that we're having to find solutions, but documentation is actually having to change, because, well, hey, we don't have an office anymore. Everybody works remote, and so this entire 3 pages of this document, they no longer apply. But there's a purpose behind that documentation for protecting your network. So now you have to rewrite all of it. It's been interesting going through that exercise as the technology and times have changed. Brad, are you seeing? I know documentation's a big thing for you guys as well. Or have you seen the same thing, or did you guys take a build it yourself from the beginning approach?
We had, there's definitely some out there that's been, you can just tell, reused over and over again. But we did write some of ours to be specific to us. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. I understand. That is very common.
Yeah, and then having to rewrite all that. Oh boy, that's fun. Or just to think of all the possibilities. So, we have to account for this now, and actually, we still have the office, but we have people all over the United States.
Yeah.
Some of them go on vacation, but they still want to work. So
yeah, and some of the people that are driving the documentation, they've done it this way for years, and so when you say, well, no, that's not how we're set up. Well, you have to be set up that way. Why do you have to be set up that way? Because again, going back to the purpose, the why are we doing? You talk all the time about, you start with the why. Why is this documentation written this way? It's to protect the assets within your network, and so we don't have to do it that way. We still have to protect the assets. We just don't have to do it the way that it's always been done.
And a lot of these standards, not all of them, but a lot of the compliance standards assume and don't really take into account the increase in cloud infrastructure. So, they're assuming you have one network and you have a fortress around that network, and it's kind of built that way. And that's not where we're at all, especially with the pandemic. I mean, it exploded the use of cloud infrastructure. So
yeah.
So yeah, dive in deep, get a good understanding of what's coming in, what's going out, where everybody is. It's gonna help you, know what you need to put into place, because if you don't understand what's going on right now, it's going to be really hard to protect it. And so those are kind of the first two steps. And then, so now you know what you're protecting, your protect surface, as they say. You know how everything's supposed to interact, who's supposed to be in there at what times, when, and where, and all of this. Next thing is you're going to go ahead and put in some preventative measures to help keep all of that zero trust in place. So you have to authenticate everything, right? So how do we do this, and how do we know everybody's who they say they are, or the system is still what it is? Or you think about software versions. So another fun aspect of this is, well, we only allow QuickBooks 4.3, and oh no, they came out with 4.4 today. They didn't they didn't tell any of us that it was going to be 4.4, the version. So to have a software or a way of, implementing something that realizes, okay, it's still QuickBooks, this version is okay, but then maybe you'll have to go in and change it to make sure that the old version isn't okay. So, how do you do this? Well, lucky for all of us, there are many preventative measures that have already been used in a lot of the industry. They're already out there. The concepts are in place. They're going to help us achieve this zero trust environment mindset philosophy we're going for. So one of the ways we already talked about, which was that segmentation, that micro perimeter. This is going to act as your border control, those digital bouncers, where it's going to prevent any unauthorized lateral movement within your protected surface. You can segment this in so many different ways, by users, by location, by functionality, similar softwares. So that's really, you can set that up kind of however you would like. Another big one that's been in place for a long time, and I think will always be around, is the least privilege principle. So you want to have that throughout your IT infrastructure, on the most micro level you can. And David, will you go over this principle again for us?
Yeah, so I mean, least privilege is, I guess you could say, a similar concept of zero trust. It's maybe you're defining that a person or a program or a device on your network, you only allow it to talk to what it absolutely has to talk to, and so you give it the least number of privileges as you possibly can. That's the idea. So you kind of start with zero. If you're talking about a user, you get access to nothing, and okay, well, you need you could be of course very tight with it and say, okay, you need access to this document, we're going to give you access to this document. That's the only thing you have access to. That's least privilege. Now, that becomes burdensome, like Brad was talking about before, that that gets very difficult to manage. And so when you're designing a network, when you're designing your computer systems, you're looking to create these segments, these little pockets where you can define, okay, this group of users, I know that they need access to this group of files or this group of resources. And so you give them that, but you only give them that. And if they ever need anything else, there needs to be a process that they go through that they get approval to get access to something else to increase their privileges, but you keep it just as low as possible. You want everybody doing only what they need to be doing and not have access to anything else.
And I'll add that with least privilege, it's great in having that process, but you also have you get what's called privilege creep. And so, like, let's say you have someone that starts in the company and they start as sales and they end up in HR. What a lot of times happens is that approval comes through and they get those privileges added to them. Well, the privileges that they no longer need are never removed. So they end up being, higher up, and they have access to all this stuff that they no longer need access to, and it just makes them a liability at that point. So you have to have a process to get approval, but you also need a process of when they change positions, if they do, to look at what they really need access to.
Yeah, you can see that a lot of times with contractors as well. A contractor will come in and maybe they're working on one particular project, and you give them access to that project, and then they leave the project and they're going to work on something else, and you end up using this little area that they had access before. You use it for more, and you start putting more information, but you never remove those privileges from the contractor. As a network administrator or systems administrator, you've got to be watching that just constantly. I love that you brought that up, Brad, about making sure that as someone leaves a certain role, you have to go back and remove those privileges as well.
Yeah, and that is a great point on think about passwords. And I know this is tough and I know this is hard, but if someone had access to a password that they needed to get their job accomplished and they moved to a new area where they don't need that password anymore, then you get the fun of changing passwords around. And we have a hard time with this, I think, with our clients. Even when someone leaves the organization, first of all, it's hard to remember where they had access to and what passwords they had access to. But then getting someone to go back in and let's say they had 5 areas they could access, changing those up, it's a very, very important step, because that ends up like that creep you're kind of talking about, the creeping into like, oh, well, we've had this password around, or this system and this way of logging in for so long. Everybody who's been in and out of this department still knows it. It's a lot. It's work to keep a secure environment, but the damage that's done afterwards, I can almost assure you, is going to be more time intensive than going in and changing all that and revoking those access. Another way to do this is something that I'm pretty sure all of you have, well, most of you have had to put into place already in some form, in some way in your life. It's multi-factor authentication, aka MFA, or two-factor authentication. We've talked about this multiple times in our chill gyms as well, but MFA is essential to achieving zero trust. Now, these are controls that are going to provide another layer of verification to every user or every entity that's inside or outside the enterprise or organization that's trying to get in or trying to get here. It adds another form of authenticity, if you would, to who's coming in. So, Brad, what are a few examples of MFA so those out there can kind of understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so the idea is, obviously it's something you know and something you have, or something that you are. So something you have, the easy way is get a text message to your phone and you have that with you. If you're looking at something that you are, it could be your fingerprint, your retina, someday you could even have, where you are. Sometimes it can be location, which is easy to spoof, so you don't really want to rely on that. But most common nowadays is a mobile device. and some kind of push notification to you is the easiest.
Definitely. And that something would be your login information. You know it. David, you look like you had something there.
Well, no, I was thinking, you're talking about where you are. In Azure, one thing that we implement is the conditional access that says, if you're not in the US, you should not be logging into these Microsoft resources. And so that's grabbing a where you are, and that's happening automatically in the background. Now, like Brad said, that can be spoofed, but it is a layer of protection. And generally that's added on, and you can build your Azure environment so that you can kind of disable 2FA. You don't necessarily have to do the authentication code if you're coming from a particular IP address. The multi-factor there is where you're coming from. So you have the password, you have the location, it's explicitly allowed. And so that's your two-factor. Whereas if you're anywhere else or using any other kind of IP address, then you're going to have to provide a token or an approval on the authenticator on your phone, something like that.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see more and more of these put into place. If you think about it now, I put in my credentials, I get a text to my cell phone most likely, but then to get into my cell phone, I need my thumb or my face to get into my cell phone. So you're actually creating 3 lines of defense there. And soon, I know David's getting ready to put it into place for the entire company. We're going to have to prick our fingers and put our blood.
Actual DNA sample.
Yeah. And it would be digitally processed to make sure that our DNA is actually who we say we are.
Yeah, we are working on the nanotechnology that we can inject directly into your bloodstream, and that way, the Jim already has had it.
Oh gosh, thanks.
Nanobots running through your body, Jim.
Yeah, great. Now I can have more nightmares about that. So put nanobots on the list of things that help you bolster your defense. But some other common preventative measures, they include encryption, what's called a next generation firewall, which they've been around for a while, but they keep coming out with new technology, new security, new protection ways to keep you and your business safe. And then one we've seen that's come a long way, behavioral AI. Now, let's think about that for a second here. So David, you mean that we're getting help from the robots?
Yeah, it will be easier if you just submit to your AI overlords. It'll be easier in the long run. It's coming, the nanobots watching your behavior. They know what you're doing. I really think probably the biggest threat at this point to that are the aliens. And so, I don't know. We need to go back to our Chill with Jim episode where we had the tinfoil hats on.
Yeah, I agree. I got one surgically implanted in my head. That's why actually my tinfoil makes your hairline go back a little further.
That's what's happening.
Why, yeah. So on this concept, David talked about it earlier. While I am sitting at my desk right now using my computer, there's a little behavioral AI running right now. David, can you talk a little bit more about how that works with that system? Like, what is it looking for? What's the concept behind that?
Well, we talked earlier about the time of day that you're accessing systems. So what AI can do is they can learn your behavior as an individual. And so maybe you don't follow the standard time of doing your work that a typical 8 to 5 business would, but humans, they tend to have certain rhythms that they create. They have habits that they create, and the AI starts picking up on it, and it says, okay, I know apparently your kids go to bed at around 7:30 p.m. and by 8 o'clock you're logging in to do some work. And so now I've learned that that's your thing. If you're logging in at 2:30 in the morning, I've never seen you do that before. So I'm going to throw an alert up here because that just doesn't make sense to the way you work. So that's that behavioral AI. It's looking at all of those indicators, and it's taking so many data points. And that's why we use artificial intelligence, because it's so good at taking just this huge blast of data points and analyzing it and creating these trends that's much harder for us to do as just mere humans.
Right. Right. And that comes into that endpoint protection rather than just a virus protection or, a malware protection. That endpoint, really treating the entire endpoint. So the user and its equipment, and looking at those things. So, well, Jim has never needed to access this location before. This is strange.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw up. He's never gone to this area of the internet before. What's going
Yeah.
on here?
Or even how quickly you're accessing things with ransomware. It goes out and it starts encrypting files very, very quickly. And so a good protection software is going to see, wait a minute, Jim's sitting here. There's no way he's fast. He's Jimmy John's fast, but he's not that fast. And so by accessing that many files that you don't usually, we're just cutting Jim off. Like, he's done. It's a whole lot better to nuke Jim and repair that little bit of damage than to let Jim get in there and destroy everything. Sorry, Jim.
That's all right. That's all right. It's very important to understand some of those protections. So when behavioral AI becomes the new trend word, you can also understand what it means when you say, well, I want that. I want it. I want my tech guys to do that. And then we'll kind of look at, so those are just some of the preventative ways. There's Brad, do you have any other examples of things that you're using? I know I covered kind of the big ones.
No, I mean, I think behavioral thing is where we're going to see kind of it pick up a little bit as far as in the future. I think just as machine learning and AI become more attainable to a small business and it's integrated in other products, you'll see it increase for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's already being used in the big cloud providers. Microsoft. It looks and it sees when you're doing something within the M365 environment that's not what you normally do, and it will alert, and that's something. It's available, in the low cost subscriptions to M365. So that's something a small business can get today without much cost. So Brad, you're absolutely right. The price of entry for using behavioral AI is going down. It's going to continue to go down.
And then the more people use it, the better it becomes too. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's like that. So I think about those weather apps, where if you have 1 million people using the same weather app and they're, let's say, just a mile apart, you can almost tell the future to the guy farthest away of what's coming because boop, 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 you're seeing it come down the line. And so I think with that AI, the more information that's out there, the more they can see, the more they understand the behaviors, and it's only gonna make it that much better, Yeah. And then one of the last stage we're just going to talk about today of implementation, it's the 2 M's, so monitoring and maintaining. So now we have all this in place. That's great. Let's just set it and forget it, like the Ronco commercials, right? We just need to set it and forget it. Not quite. It's important to continually monitor and maintain your infrastructure. You want to look for new things, like new areas that should be included in your protect surface. So oh, we didn't really think about that, but that, let's go ahead and put that in this perimeter because we need to protect that. You want to look out for vulnerabilities that you didn't know about, that you didn't see, that you didn't account for. And then just as a whole, you can continue to evaluate your current policy and ways to enhance it, ways to make it better. One of the great things about working and talking with people in your industry is you get to see some of the new or different ways that they do things. So I know, like, having Brad be involved and getting to know Brad as Strix, we've been able to share back and forth some of like the tricks of the trades, if you were, that each of us have found along the way. And so that's that constant improvement that we're talking about. You can talk and evaluate and find new ways of doing things. Employing a real-time monitoring system is really, it's super essential to this. It'll help you identify malicious activity really quick, super quick, and it's key. With, while you're in the zero trust model, most of the times the things you're putting in place are kind of preventative measures. They're preventative in nature, but you really need to incorporate this real-time monitoring because it's going to help you improve the breakout time. So people refer to breakout time, which means like those critical moments between when an intruder compromises the first perimeter. So when they first get in that window, and to the time where they're actually able to laterally move or access other parts of your security perimeter. So even with computing, it seems like it just goes like this. That's why these AI systems, the software really helps us out here, because there's still some nanoseconds that it takes from the first time it breaks in to where it can do some damage. And that just little speck of time there it's crucial to identify, to stop, and maybe just limit how far it's going to go. It's going to help you detect, investigate, and remediate. It's going to help all of those things along the way. So that's something that we would recommend getting into place. Huge.
Yeah, that's an important piece of it, and I think we're only going to see things speed up, and how quickly you're going to have to react. That time is going to continue to shrink. Right now, it's very, very, very common for hackers to get on a network and they stick around for 3 to 6 months before they ever start doing anything. Part of that is a response to tools that would detect too much activity and they would shut things down, and so hackers delay and they put a little piece, and so they've gone that way. At some point that may switch back where they start going faster because the tools now are picking up those delays. They're looking for anything that is just a little bit different, and so you may have less time as a hacker to utilize what you put in place. And so always that cat and mouse game going back and forth. But it seems like with technology, everything, that the time frames get smaller and smaller and smaller. So I would expect the more real-time monitoring, the more quick reacting tools that you can put in place, it's going to be important.
Definitely. So we've given you a few of the ways that you can start your zero trust philosophy. A brief recap here. You're gonna identify what you want to protect, your protect surface. So then after that, you're gonna kind of do like an inventory of your assets and the way that they talk to each other, the communication, what's normal with communication. You're gonna go ahead and institute those preventative measures that we talked about. And then to top it all off, you're going to monitor and maintain the environment continually. They have tools out there where you don't need someone like David just staring at the screen forever. That's what tiger droppings is for. So that's inside joke there. Just some good recommendations. I hope everybody out there has been able to learn a little bit more about the zero trust mentality, mind frame, mindset, philosophy.
Oh,
Yeah, but I mean, I've gotten so zero trust. Like I don't even trust myself to leave where I am. So I built this wall with these
I don't blame you.
security.
It's a dangerous world out there.
It is. It is. So, anything else out there that we had come in or that anyone wanted to touch on before we go about zero trust? Maybe something I
No,
missed.
there's nothing else I want to bring up, Brad.
I was going to bring this up. I think it's an interesting point. Is that so? You've got three main cloud providers, being Amazon or AWS. You have Microsoft with Azure, and you have Google with Google Cloud Platform. And I think it's interesting. We were talking about the history of zero trust. We look at like Amazon. Most of it started in 2006. Azure wasn't that far after that. Google was a couple of years after both of them. And so you can do zero trust inside of AWS, and you can do zero trust inside of Azure. There's great tools to do it. But Google, from the ground up, built it with zero trust in mind. And so they call it their Beyond Corp. And that's built in from the ground up to own the zero trust model. So it's just an interesting concept if you look at, just a 2-year difference from when these services launched, that there was a different approach to them.
Yeah, and I think that's a direct response. You bring up AWS, and one of the major problems out there, it's not really a vulnerability. It's just it was implemented poorly by the user of AWS. But all these elastic searches out there, the storage bins that they created, the proper name's escaping me right now, but they were made public, and it was kind of by default. That was just the default setting. You're putting it out there. You need it to be easy to get to. That's why you're putting it out there. And people started putting very important information out there. And there have been so many big data leaks that came from public information. And it's just because that was the default. And so, yeah, Google's probably watching that saying, hey, we got to do something better. And
so, I mean, again, they all have tools to do it, but from the ground.
Right.
When you set up anything in the Google Cloud Platform, you are doing zero trust from the beginning.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Great. Glad I asked that because I didn't know that. And after last week's episode, I mean, we found out 80 to 90% of people are using, the majority of cloud users are using AWS. So 80 to 90% of the cloud that's being used out there is owned by Skynet, aka Amazon. So just interesting to know that. And so, any questions that everybody has out there, please be sure to write us on Facebook, YouTube, hit us up on LinkedIn, shoot us an email. We're accessible by all those means. We're not going to trust you right away, but after you do some multi-factor authentication to let us know who you really are.
Yeah, you got to prove yourself to us.
Yeah.
Trust is not freely given. You have to earn that.
That's right. That's right. So thank you all for joining us. Brad, thank you for coming out. As always, you're a great wealth of knowledge here. David, what do we have on the books for next week?
Yeah, so next week we're sticking with the cybersecurity world. We're going to have Rafi Ozick on next week. He is the CEO of Privatize, and Privatize is the new VPN solution that we're using really in some cool ways, some very effective ways. Privatize has been great in working with us and taking the idea of a business class VPN and really turning it into a virtual central network, I guess you could say. The whole idea before about having this is my network at my office, we're now moving that into this VPN world. So we're going to have Rafi on to talk about that a little bit more and what Privatize is doing.
Yes, so come on out, join us next week. It's going to be a good one. He's done a lot in since I think I saw just on his LinkedIn from 2012. He's done and accomplished so many things. So join us next week. As always, like us, follow us, subscribe to us, send us gifts, shoot us an email. If you see us give us a high five, all those fun things. And on YouTube, Facebook, all those social media areas. And we will see you next week, where it's always the same chill time and the same chill network. Thank you very much for